Did you ever wonder what it was like to learn in the Middle Ages, between the 5th and 15th centuries? Forget about your textbooks and laptops. Imagine a world where knowledge itself was a treasure, guarded fiercely and priced like kingdoms. What if the very tools of learning cost more than a manor house or a knight's entire armor? Get ready to uncover the most jaw-dropping, bank-breaking educational gear from the medieval world. Number 1. Ornate lecterns and study desks. The humble study desk, the place where countless hours of academic pursuit unfolded, was not always a simple plank of wood. For the truly elite scholars, the powerful abbots, or the princes seeking enlightenment, their study space became a masterpiece of craftsmanship and a symbol of their immense wealth. These were not just pieces of furniture. They were architectural marvels, meticulously designed and lavishly adorned, often serving as a secure vault for other priceless educational tools. Think of them as the medieval equivalent of a custom-built, diamond-encrusted workstation, complete with built-in security for your super-rare data drives. Building one of these magnificent lecterns or study decks began with the very best timber. Oak, certainly, but not just any oak. We are talking about ancient, slow-growth oak, timber that had cured for decades, sometimes even a century, ensuring its stability and resistance to warping. Woods like walnut, imported from distant lands, added a rich dark hue, while cedar, prized for its aromatic qualities and natural pest resistance, might be used for internal linings of drawers and compartments. Imagine the journey of these massive logs floated down rivers, hauled by oxen across muddy tracks, each plank carefully selected by master carpenters who could discern the true quality of the grain. The sheer volume of high-grade timber required for a large, robust lectern or a sprawling study desk would be substantial, representing a significant initial investment before a single cut was even made. Once the raw timber was acquired, the true artistry began. These desks were not mass-produced. They were commissions, singular creations tailored to the patron's exact specifications. A master carpenter would lead a team of skilled woodworkers, some specializing in joinery, others in carving. The construction involved complex joinery techniques, dovetail joints, mortise, and tenon connections, all cut with incredible precision by hand. No nails or screws held these grand pieces together. Only wood, skillfully fitted and sometimes reinforced with wooden pegs. The structure had to be immensely strong, capable of supporting the weight of heavy, vellum-bound manuscripts, candelabras, and various instruments without even a slight creak or wobble. This level of structural integrity, built for centuries of use, demanded an almost obsessive attention to detail and countless hours of highly paid labor. Beyond the fundamental construction, the true expense lay in the ornamentation. These lecterns often featured elaborate carvings that depicted scenes from the Bible, allegories of knowledge, or the heraldic symbols of the patron. Lions, griffins, intricate floral patterns, and figures of saints or classical philosophers might emerge from the wood, each detail painstakingly chiseled by a master carver. Gilding was common, with thin sheets of real gold leaf applied to carved elements, catching the candlelight and lending an ethereal glow to the study space. Imagine the shimmer of gold on the carved acanthus leaves, reflecting the flickering flame of a beeswax candle during a late-night session of reading ancient texts. This gold leaf was not cheap. Sourced from mines across Europe, painstakingly refined and beaten into sheets thinner than paper, its application was a delicate, specialized skill, adding immense cost to the project. Inlays were another feature that significantly boosted the price tag. Precious and semi-precious materials were often inlaid into the wood surfaces. Ivory, imported from distant lands and carved into intricate patterns or miniature scenes, might be set flush with the dark wood. Tortoiseshell, with its unique mottled patterns, could be used for decorative panels. Exotic woods like ebony or rosewood cut into delicate geometric shapes might form marquetry patterns across the desktop or the base of the lectern, creating a mosaic of different colors and textures. These materials were rare and expensive to acquire, and the process of cutting, fitting, and polishing them required incredible patience and specialized tools, pushing the labor costs ever higher. Some of these opulent study desks incorporated hidden compartments, a feature that added both security and allure. A false drawer might conceal a deeper locked space for sensitive documents or especially valuable manuscripts. A cleverly designed panel might slide open to reveal a secret cavity for a small, precious astronomical instrument or a collection of rare coins. The engineering behind these concealed spaces was complex, requiring ingenious mechanisms and perfect concealment. The very existence of such features spoke to the patron's desire for privacy and protection for their intellectual treasures, elements that naturally commanded a premium price. Take, for example, the rumored study desk commissioned by the wealthy Florentine merchant Cosimo de Medici sometime in the mid-15th century for his private library in Florence. Historical accounts, often passed down through scribes and inventories, describe a desk crafted from dark walnut, inlaid with ivory depictions of the muses and classical philosophers. Its surface was said to be large enough to spread out multiple hefty codices simultaneously. The legs were carved into the form of powerful lions, their eyes set with polished obsidian. One particular detail mentioned in a fragmentary inventory from the Medici family archives, recorded as Desco di studio con segreto per pergameni prezioso, describes a hidden compartment accessible only by a precise sequence of presses on carved rosettes, a mechanism so intricate it was said to have been designed by a clockmaker. Total cost of this singular piece of furniture was never explicitly stated in a single surviving document, but contemporaneous records of other Medici commissions suggest that a piece of this scale and artistry, combining master carpentry, intricated hidden mechanisms, would have cost more than several ordinary houses in Florence. It would represent years of a master artisan's income and a significant portion of a skilled laborer's lifetime wages. The lectern within a monastery, often placed in the scriptorium or the main library, was another example of this grandeur. These were frequently large standing lecterns, designed to hold massive choral books, or the Bible itself, for public reading. They were often crafted from bronze or brass, cast and then chased with intricate religious imagery. Imagine the shimmer of polished bronze reflecting the light from stained glass windows as a monk read aloud from a beautifully illuminated manuscript. Casting process for such large metal pieces was incredibly complex, requiring a foundry, high temperatures, and skilled metal workers to pour and shape the molten alloy. After casting, the metal would be painstakingly refined, polished, and often engraved or embellished with enamel work. Cost of the raw metals, particularly if they were high purity bronze or brass, combined with the extreme specialized labor, made these metal lecterns incredibly expensive. A Benedictine monastery in northern France during the 13th century commissioned a bronze eagle lectern for their main chapel. Records indicate the acquisition of over 1,000 pounds of bronze and the full-time employment of 3 master metalworkers for nearly 2 years to complete the commission. This project was funded by donations from several wealthy patrons, a testament to its exorbitant cost. The eagle, with its wings spread symbolizing St. John, was not merely a functional object, but a piece of devotional art, its cost reflecting its dual purpose as a sacred vessel and a functional educational tool for spreading the word. Even the smaller, portable lecterns used by individual scholars or wealthy students were not simple. These might be crafted from fine wood, collapsible for transport, but still adorned with subtle carvings or a small amount of inlay. The value came from the quality of the wood and the precision of its construction, ensuring it would last for a lifetime of study and travel. These compact yet finely crafted pieces were often gifts from nobility to their favored scholars, a clear indication of their worth. A receipt from a London guild of carpenters from the late 14th century shows a payment for a lectorium portatile for a young nobleman entering Oxford. Price recorded was equivalent to the annual wages of a skilled craftsman, a significant sum for something we might today consider a piece of office furniture. Construction of these ornate lecterns and study desks was a lengthy process, often taking months, sometimes even years to complete. During this time, the master artisans and their apprentices would be fully occupied, their skills commanding high wages. The materials themselves, especially the precious metals, rare woods, and exotic inlays, often had to be sourced from far-flung locations, incurring further costs for transport and acquisition. These were not items purchased off a shelf. They were bespoke commissions, works of art that served a very practical, yet highly symbolic purpose. They embodied the patron's commitment to scholarship and their desire to provide the most magnificent setting for the pursuit of knowledge. The investment in such a piece of furniture was a statement, a declaration of status and intellectual ambition, a tangible representation of the value placed on learning within the highest echelons of medieval society. Owning such a study setup was akin to owning a private art gallery and a highly specialized research facility all in one, built with the finest materials and an almost immeasurable amount of skilled human effort. Number 2. Globes and sophisticated cartographic instruments. Long before satellites and GPS, understanding the world was an academic and practical challenge of immense proportions. For the medieval scholar or navigator, a globe or a sophisticated cartographic instrument was not just a map. It was a representation of the known universe, a tool for teaching astronomy, geography, and even theology. These items were incredibly rare, extraordinarily complex to produce, and thus astronomically expensive. They were the apex of scientific and artistic craftsmanship, available only to the wealthiest patrons or the most powerful institutions. The very concept of a globe, a spherical representation of Earth, or the celestial sphere was a profound intellectual leap. Early medieval globes, particularly terrestrial ones, were exceedingly rare. Most understanding of geography came from flat maps, or mappa mundi, which varied wildly in accuracy and often incorporated theological concepts alongside geographical features. True globe required a deep understanding of spherical geometry, advanced craftsmanship to create a perfectly round sphere, and meticulous artistic skill to project known land masses onto its curved surface. Imagine the technical challenges of taking a flat, often inaccurate, map and wrapping it precisely onto a sphere. This was not a task for the faint of heart or the unskilled hand. Primary material for a terrestrial globe was often a wooden sphere, carved and sanded to as perfect a roundness as possible. This itself was a highly skilled process. The wood had to be dense and stable, like seasoned oak or beech, to prevent warping and cracking over time. Once the wooden core was complete, layers of gesso, a mixture of plaster and glue, would be applied, sanded, smooth, and polished to create an immaculate white surface. This provided the ideal canvas for the cartographer. For celestial globes, the same process applied, but the surface would be dark, often painted a deep blue or black to represent the night sky. The true expense then unfolded in the mapping itself. Cartographer, a highly educated individual, would meticulously draw the continents, oceans, rivers, and mountains based on available knowledge. This knowledge was often gleaned from ancient Greek and Roman texts, Arab treatises, and the accounts of travelers and crusaders. The lines of latitude and longitude, if included, had to be drawn with utmost precision. Every detail was hand-painted with extremely fine brushes, using pigments derived from rare minerals and plants. Ultramarine, made from lapis lazuli, imported from Afghanistan, was often used for oceans and skies, its vibrant blue shimmer a testament to its exorbitant cost. Verdigris for greens, vermilion for reds, all painstakingly ground and mixed. This was not just drawing. It was miniature painting on a curved surface. Furthermore, these globes often included intricate details beyond mere geography. Ships sailing the oceans, mythical beasts inhabiting uncharted waters, and small depictions of cities or castles might be added. For celestial globes, individual stars would be painted, constellations outlined, and mythological figures of the constellations depicted with stunning artistry. Each star might be a tiny dot of silver or gold leaf, glimmering on the dark sphere. This level of detail meant thousands of hours of highly skilled labor for the cartographer and the illuminator, who would often work in tandem, each contributing their specialized expertise to the creation of a single globe. One of the most famous early surviving terrestrial globes, the Erdapfel, created by Martin Behaim in 1492, just before Columbus's voyage, gives us a glimpse into the complexity and expense involved. While technically late medieval, it exemplifies the culmination of these techniques. Constructed from a laminated linen ball reinforced with wood, then coated with parchment and painted, it shows a world without the Americas, but with astonishing detail for its time. The creation of such a globe was a monumental undertaking, requiring the combined efforts of a cartographer, a painter, and a mathematician. Cost of its creation would have been immense, equivalent to a noble's annual income or the price of a small fleet of merchant ships. It was a unique commission for the city of Nuremberg, a symbol of their intellectual prowess and global aspirations. Beyond the terrestrial or celestial globes, sophisticated cartographic instruments also commanded enormous prices. These included large, intricately detailed flat maps, sometimes made on multiple sheets of vellum sewn together to form a grand mappa mundi. These maps were not just practical tools. They were often works of art designed for display in great halls or libraries. They might feature elaborate borders, heraldic devices, and even portraits of patrons or important historical figures. The size of these maps alone meant a colossal expenditure on vellum, which was made from animal skins and represented a significant cost per square foot. The labor of the scribes and illuminators who filled these vast surfaces with information and art would be equally immense. Portolan charts, used for navigation in the Mediterranean and Atlantic, were another example of high-value cartographic tools. These charts were drawn with incredible precision, showing coastlines, harbors, and rum lines radiating from compass roses. They were often drawn on single large sheets of vellum, and their accuracy was paramount, meaning they were produced by highly specialized cartographers, often in coastal cities like Genoa or Venice. A well-made Portolan chart could mean the difference between a successful voyage and a shipwreck, making them invaluable to merchants and mariners. Typical 14th century Portolan chart, even one with minimal illumination, could cost the equivalent of a small trading vessel's cargo, a significant investment for a merchant who relied on its accuracy. Another type of sophisticated instrument was the armillary sphere, used for teaching and demonstrating the movements of celestial bodies. These were intricate models of the universe, typically made from brass or bronze rings, representing the equator, ecliptic, meridians, and other celestial circles. At the center, a small globe represented the Earth, or sometimes the Sun, in later, more heliocentric models. Crafting an armillary sphere required highly skilled metalworkers who could accurately cast, turn, and assemble the numerous rings, ensuring they moved smoothly and precisely. The rings were often engraved with scales and astronomical symbols, sometimes inlaid with silver or niello for greater clarity and beauty. The larger and more complex the armillary sphere, the more expensive it became. A detailed armillary sphere for a university or a royal court might be gilded, adding another layer of cost. A record from the University of Paris in the late 14th century shows the acquisition of an armillary sphere described as sphera armillaris di air aurato, armillary sphere of gilded bronze, which cost an amount equivalent to the yearly stipends of several professors, was considered an indispensable tool for teaching astronomy and mathematics, a tangible model of the cosmos. The value of these globes and cartographic instruments was not just in their functional utility, but also in their symbolic power. Owning a magnificent globe or a detailed map was a clear demonstration of wealth, learning, and an expansive where-do. For a monarch, it signified control over territories and an interest in global exploration. For a scholar, it represented mastery of the cosmos and a dedication to scientific inquiry. These were not mass-produced items. Each was a singular creation, taking months, sometimes years, to complete, requiring the collaboration of multiple highly skilled artisans. The cost of the raw materials, the precious pigments, the vast quantities of vellum, and especially the incredibly specialized labor of the cartographers, painters, and metalworkers, combined to make globes and sophisticated cartographic instruments among the most expensive educational tools of the medieval era. They were truly objects worthy of kings and the most learned minds. Number 3. Alchemical laboratory equipment. The pursuit of alchemy in the Middle Ages was not just a fringe activity. It was a serious, scholarly endeavor, often intertwined with natural philosophy, medicine, and early chemistry. Alchemists, supported by wealthy patrons, sought to transmute base metals into gold, discover the elixir of life, and unlock the secrets of the universe. To achieve these ambitious goals, they required highly specialized, often custom-made laboratory equipment which, due to its complexity materials and the specialized skills required to produce it, was incredibly expensive. This wasn't merely about glass flasks. It was about elaborate furnaces, precision distillation apparatus, and vessels made from exotic materials. The heart of any alchemical laboratory was the furnace or athanor. Unlike a simple hearth, an athanor was a complex piece of engineering designed to maintain precise and consistent temperatures over long periods. These furnaces were often built from refractory bricks capable of withstanding intense heat and might incorporate multiple chambers, flues, and regulated airflows. Some were quite large, almost like small kilns, custom-built for specific alchemical processes that could last for days or weeks. Construction of such a furnace required skilled masons who understood the properties of different clays and bricks and how to build a structure that could provide stable, controlled heat. The materials themselves were expensive, and the labor involved in their meticulous construction added significantly to the cost. Imagine hiring a team of specialized builders just to construct your glorified stove, ensuring it was perfect for delicate chemical reactions. Beyond the furnace, the glassware was arguably the most critical and most expensive component of an alchemist's toolkit. Medieval glassmaking was an art form, not an industrial process. Alchemical glassware needed to be able to withstand extreme temperature changes, corrosive chemicals, and prolonged heating. This meant using high-quality silica, often imported from specific sand deposits, and employing skilled glassblowers who could create complex shapes with uniform wall thickness. Flasks, retorts, vessels with long, downward-pointing necks used for distillation. Alembics, the upper part of a still with a condenser and receiver, and various condensers were all hand-blown. Process was fraught with risk. A single imperfection could cause the vessel to shatter during a delicate experiment, rendering hours of work and expensive materials useless. Consider the cost of a single perfectly formed glass retort, designed for a specific distillation. It required a master glassblower, often working in specialized workshops, taking hours to create cool and anneal the glass. The larger or more intricate the piece, the higher the cost. Some vessels were designed with multiple chambers or internal labyrinths to facilitate complex reactions, pushing the boundaries of medieval glass technology. Glass, especially clear defect-free glass, was a luxury item in the Middle Ages. Production was energy-intensive. requiring large quantities of firewood to fuel the furnaces. The skills of the glassblowers were highly specialized and passed down through apprenticeships, making their labor extremely valuable. A set of high-quality alchemical glassware could easily cost more than a knight's chainmail armor, a testament to its fragility and the expertise required for its creation. Then there were the specialized vessels made from other materials. Lead was used for its resistance to certain acids, copper for its conductivity, and sometimes even silver or gold for highly sensitive or precious reactions, though these were exceptionally rare. Alchemists working with mercury, for instance, might use iron or even ceramic vessels lined with specific glazes to contain the volatile liquid. Cost of these metals, especially noble metals like silver or gold, was immense, and shaping them into precise vessels required the skills of a master metalsmith. Imagine a small, perfectly formed silver crucible designed to hold and heat a precious alchemical mixture without contamination. The material cost alone would be staggering. Mortars and pestles were essential for grinding substances, and for alchemists, these were not simple kitchen tools. They were often made from extremely hard, non-porous materials like agate, granite, or even porphyry. These materials were difficult to work with, requiring specialized tools and immense patience to carve and polish into the ideal shape for grinding. Purpose was to ensure no contamination of the chemical mixtures and to allow for the finest possible powders. A large, well-crafted agate mortar and pestle could be a generational investment, costing the equivalent of a small plot of land due to the raw material's rarity and the extensive labor involved in its creation. Beyond the core equipment, alchemists also needed a range of smaller, precise tools. Tongs, spatulas, filters made from finely woven cloth or even parchment, and various measuring devices were all meticulously crafted. Balances for weighing ingredients had to be incredibly accurate, requiring finely tuned mechanisms, often with brass or bronze pans and delicate pivots. The very best balances might even incorporate iron or steel for the pivot points, materials that were expensive to produce and work with in the medieval period. A highly sensitive balance, capable of weighing minute quantities, would have been the product of a skilled instrument maker commanding a price commensurate with its precision and craftsmanship. The acquisition of alchemical materials themselves also contributed to the overall expense of maintaining a laboratory. Rare minerals, exotic plant extracts, and purified metals were often incredibly costly. Think of cinnabar for mercury, galena for lead, or various salts and acids, some of which had to be produced through complex and dangerous processes. The search for these materials often involved long-distance trade, adding significant transport costs. The entire enterprise of alchemy was a financial drain, sustainable only with the backing of wealthy patrons, kings, nobles, or powerful churchmen who hoped to gain immense wealth or eternal life from the alchemist's discoveries. Consider the laboratory of an alchemist like Roger Bacon, a Franciscan friar and scholar from the 13th century, who, despite being a friar, engaged in experimental science. While not a modern laboratory in any sense, accounts of his work suggest sophisticated apparatus. Imagine the chronicled requests for funding from patrons, not just for his intellectual pursuits, but for the very specialized equipment he needed. Those specific monetary figures for his full laboratory setup are hard to find in a single ledger. Piecing together costs for glass, metal, and construction in that era suggests that equipping even a modest alchemical workshop would have required the equivalent of a substantial urban property. For a royal alchemist like those employed by figures such as Edward III of England, whose records indicate vast sums spent on philosophical experiments, the cost of equipping and maintaining a full-scale alchemical laboratory, with its complex furnaces, extensive glassware, and precision instruments, would have rivaled the cost of constructing a small cast-wing, or maintaining a small mercenue, his piebald, nay cost. Of cost. The danger involved in alchemical work, with toxic fumes and explosive reactions, also meant that qualified labor was at a premium, adding to the overall cost of the pursuit of the magnum opus. Number 4. Private libraries and extensive book collections. In the Middle Ages, owning even a single book was a sign of immense wealth and prestige. Amassing a private library, a collection of dozens or even hundreds of books, was an undertaking that few could afford. These were not printed paperbacks. Each book was a unique, handmade manuscript, often crafted with extraordinary care and artistry. Cost of acquiring such a collection made it one of the most expensive educational tools imaginable, truly available only to the highest nobility, the wealthiest merchants, or the most powerful ecclesiastical institutions. Private library was a treasure trove, a symbol of knowledge, power, and limitless resources. The fundamental reason for the astronomical cost of books was the labor-intensive production process. Every single book was meticulously copied by hand by scribes, typically monks or professional copyists. Before a single word could be written, the material for the pages had to be prepared. This was vellum, a fine parchment made from animal skins, usually calf, sheep, or goat. Producing vellum was a complex and time-consuming process. Skins had to be cleaned, soaked, stretched on frames, scraped thin, and then polished to a smooth, supple surface suitable for writing. A single large book, like a Bible or a comprehensive scholastic text, might require the skins of hundreds of animals. Cost of acquiring these skins, especially high-quality, blemish-free vellum, was substantial. Imagine the sheer animal husbandry required just to produce the paper for a substantial library. Once the vellum was prepared, the scribe began the arduous task of copying the text. This was slow work, often taking months or even years for a single large manuscript. Monks in scriptoria would spend their days hunched over desks, painstakingly transcribing texts, letter by letter, word by word. Professional scribes were highly skilled and commanded significant fees. Errors were common, and meticulous proofreading was necessary. The ink itself was carefully prepared, often from gallnuts or lamp black, requiring specific knowledge of recipes and preparation. The quality of the handwriting, its consistency, and its legibility all contributed to the value of the finished product. Beyond the basic text, many manuscripts were illuminated, meaning they were decorated with intricate designs, borders, and miniature paintings. This work was performed by illuminators, who were highly skilled artists, specializing in this delicate craft. They used vibrant pigments derived from rare and expensive materials. Lapis lazuli for brilliant blue, ultramarine, crushed insects for deep red, cochineal, minerals for greens and yellows. Gold leaf was frequently applied, beaten to astonishing thinness, and then meticulously applied to create shimmering initials, borders, and backgrounds. The process of applying gold leaf required a steady hand and immense precision. The more elaborate the illumination, the higher the cost of the book. A single full-page miniature with intricate gold work could add the equivalent of a craftsman's annual salary to the cost of a book. The binding of a manuscript was another significant expense. Books were bound in sturdy wooden boards, often covered with leather, calfskin, pigskin, or even exotic leathers. The leather might be tooled with intricate patterns, stamped with designs, or even adorned with precious metals and jewels. Large, important books, like Bibles or liturgical texts, might have elaborate bindings incorporating silver, gold, ivory carvings, or inset gemstones. These precious bindings not only protected the valuable contents, but also served as a dazzling display of wealth and devotion. Imagine a massive tome, its covers studded with jewels, its spine gleaming with tooled gold. Cost of these materials and the skilled jewelers and metalworkers required to craft such a binding were immense. Let's consider specific examples. A single illuminated Bible could take years to produce. The Winchester Bible from the 12th century, for instance, is a monumental work, a true masterpiece of English Romanesque art. Though its precise cost cannot be found in a simple receipt, the labor involved, multiple scribes, numerous illuminators, the thousands of animal skins required for its vellum pages, and the precious pigments and gold used would have made it one of the most expensive objects of its time. Its estimated value, if it were to be commissioned today with medieval methods and materials, would be in the millions. In its own time, it would have consumed the annual income of a powerful baron for years. It was a spiritual and intellectual powerhouse, a tool for education and devotion, and an undeniable testament to the wealth of its patrons. For a private individual to build a library, they would need to commission or purchase many such books. King Charles V of France, in the late 14th century, amassed a magnificent library at the Louvre Palace, comprising over 1,000 volumes. This was an extraordinarily large collection for its time. Each acquisition was a substantial investment. Records of his commissions show payments to scribes and illuminators that indicate these sums were equivalent to the cost of maintaining a small retinue of knights or building a significant section of a castle. To acquire books for such a library, a patron might send agents across Europe to seek out specific texts, or commission copies from monastic scriptoria. This involved negotiation, travel, and the payment of large sums in coin or trade goods. Cost of a book could vary, depending on its size, the complexity of its text, the quality of the vellum, and the extent of its illumination. A basic, unadorned, scholastic text might still cost the equivalent of a good war horse. A beautifully illuminated book of hours, a personal prayer book, could cost as much as a small farm. A collection of theological treatises, classical works, or scientific texts, which would form the core of a scholar's library, would represent a fortune. The sheer number of books in a significant private library multiplied these individual costs into truly staggering sums. Beyond the initial purchase, books required careful storage and preservation. They were often stored in chests, on shelves, or within custom-built lecterns in secure rooms protected from damp, rodents, and theft. The maintenance of a private library also involved skilled librarians or custodians, adding to the ongoing expense. For example, the wealthy merchant Francesco Dattini of Prato, in the late 14th century, meticulously documented his expenses. While he didn't have a massive library like a king, his inventories show that the acquisition of even a dozen substantial merchant account books and religious texts represented a considerable portion of his liquid wealth, indicating the value placed on these tools of commerce and spiritual guidance. His correspondence reveals repeated discussions about the cost of securing copies of specific trade manuals, highlighting the significant investment involved even for a successful businessman. In an era before printing presses, books were unique artifacts, each a work of art and a repository of knowledge. The accumulation of such a collection for a private library was a monumental financial undertaking, consuming vast resources over many years. It was a clear demonstration of the owner's status, their commitment to learning, and their ability to command the finest artisans and materials of the age. Private library was not just a collection of books. It was a testament to extreme wealth, intellect, and the profound value placed on written knowledge in the medieval world. Number 5. Astronomical instruments. For medieval scholars, understanding the cosmos was not merely an academic pursuit. It was deeply intertwined with philosophy, theology, medicine, and navigation. Precision astronomical instruments were the cutting-edge technology of their time, allowing for observation, calculation, and prediction of celestial events. These devices, primarily astrolabes and quadrants, were incredibly complex to design and construct, requiring the finest metals, highly skilled artisans, and immense precision. Consequently, they were exceptionally expensive, placing them firmly in the hands of kings, powerful universities or the wealthiest scholars. Owning one was a clear demonstration of wealth, learning, and a connection to the highest forms of knowledge. The astrolabe stands as the most iconic and versatile of these instruments. It was essentially a complex analog computer, capable of solving various problems in spherical astronomy, telling time, determining latitude, and even casting horoscopes. An astrolabe consisted of multiple parts: a heavy brass or bronze disc called the mater, a removable plate for a specific latitude called a tympan, and a rotating star map called the rete, all topped by an alidade for sighting stars. Each of these components had to be crafted with extreme precision. The material itself, typically high quality, brass or bronze, was expensive. These alloys had to be pure, uniform, and free of defects, ensuring the instrument's stability and accuracy. Acquiring large, flawless sheets of such metal was a significant cost, but the true expense lay in the craftsmanship. Astrolabes were made by master instrument makers, often working in specialized workshops in centers like Baghdad, Toledo, or later, London and Paris. These artisans were not merely metalworkers. They possessed a deep understanding of astronomy and mathematics. The process began with casting the metal, which itself was an exacting task. Then the plates had to be meticulously turned on a lathe to achieve perfect flatness and thickness. Intricate network of lines representing coordinates, constellations, and various scales had to be precisely engraved onto the surface. This was done by hand, often with incredibly fine tools, requiring an extremely steady hand and an almost obsessive attention to detail. Every degree, every minute, every star position had to be marked with absolute accuracy. Imagine engraving hundreds of tiny perfect lines and points onto a metal surface by hand, knowing a single slip could ruin the entire piece. This precision was paramount for the instrument to function correctly. The rete, the star map on the astrolabe, was particularly challenging. It was an open work, brass plate, with delicate pointers for key stars. This required a highly skilled metal worker to cut away all the excess material, leaving only the fine tracery of the star positions. The delicacy of the rete meant it was prone to bending or breaking, and its creation represented hours of painstaking, meticulous work. Some astrolabes also featured intricate openwork designs, or even small figures of constellations as part of the rete, adding an artistic dimension that further increased their cost. Completed astrolabe would then be adorned with elaborate markings, sometimes gilded and perhaps even inlaid with silver for contrast and beauty. The suspension ring at the top often featured decorative elements or coat of arms of the patron. The back of the astrolabe was equally complex, often engraved with calendar scales, trigonometric grids, and other computational aids. The number of calculations and astronomical knowledge etched into its surface was staggering, making it a portable library of celestial data. Consider the astrolabe, commissioned for King Philip II of France in the early 13th century. While specific monetary figures are scarce for such early commissions, contemporary records of similar high-precision metalwork suggest its cost would have been equivalent to the annual income of a successful knight, or enough to purchase several substantial properties in a town. The sheer amount of skilled labor and high-quality brass involved, combined with the intellectual expertise of the astrolabe maker, placed it in a class of its own. It was not just a tool. It was a statement of royal patronage, of science and knowledge. Quadrants were another important astronomical instrument, simpler than astrolabes, but still highly sophisticated. Quadrant was a quarter circle made of wood or metal, typically brass or bronze, with a plumb line and a sighting device. It was used to measure angles of elevation, particularly of celestial bodies, to determine time or latitude. Like astrolabes, the accuracy of a quadrant depended entirely on the precision of its construction and the meticulous engraving of its scale. A large, precisely calibrated brass quadrant, perhaps with engraved astronomical tables on its reverse, would be a costly item, especially if it was commissioned by a university or a wealthy scholar for observational purposes. The mural quadrant, a much larger, fixed version, often built into the walls of an observatory, was even more expensive, requiring significant masonry and highly accurate metalwork. Other less common but equally expensive instruments included torquetums, complex mechanical devices designed to show the positions of celestial bodies in various coordinate systems, and elaborate sundials, especially monumental ones or portable ones made of precious metals. The level of mechanical engineering and metalwork required for these instruments was at the absolute zenith of medieval technology. For example, a torquetum used by a professor of astronomy at the University of Bologna in the 14th century would have been a bespoke creation, likely made of multiple articulated brass rings and pointers. The detailed work involved in its construction, ensuring all parts moved smoothly and accurately, would have rivaled the complexity of a small clock mechanism, thereby commanding a price that only institutions or exceptionally wealthy individuals. The expense of these astronomical instruments was a combination of rare materials, exceptionally skilled labor, and the intellectual property embedded within their design. The makers were often scholars themselves, deeply versed in astronomy and mathematics. Their knowledge is valuable as their manual dexterity. These instruments were not merely functional. They were often beautiful objects, their surfaces gleaming with engraved lines and polished metal, designed to inspire awe and intellectual curiosity. They were used to teach students at universities the principles of astronomy, to calculate prayer times in mosques, to aid navigators at sea, and to generate astrological charts for royal courts. Their precision, their beauty, and their sheer complexity made them some of the most sought-after and astronomically expensive educational tools of the medieval world, highly valued as instruments of both scientific inquiry and societal influence. Number 6. Illuminated manuscripts. In the tapestry of medieval learning, the illuminated manuscript reigns supreme as the ultimate symbol of wealth, knowledge, and artistic devotion. Before the printing press, every book was a unique, hand-crafted masterpiece. These were not mere texts. They were works of art, painstakingly created and often adorned with dazzling colors, shimmering gold, and intricate designs. The resources required to produce an illuminated manuscript, from the materials to the incredible human labor, made them unimaginably expensive, placing them squarely as the most costly educational tool of the entire medieval period. Owning even one was a mark of immense prestige. Possessing a collection was the ultimate display of power and learning. The journey of an illuminated manuscript began with its foundation, the vellum. This was no ordinary paper. Vellum was made from the prepared skins of animals, primarily calves, sheep, or goats. The process of transforming raw hides into smooth, luminous writing surfaces was arduous and lengthy. Skins were soaked in lime baths, scraped clean of flesh and hair, stretched taut on frames, and then meticulously scraped again with crescent-shaped knives until they were uniformly thin and supple. Finally, they were rubbed with pumice and chalk to create a perfect surface for ink and paint. A single large book, like a Bible or a comprehensive medical treatise, could require hundreds of animal skins. The best vellum, smooth and white, often came from stillborn or very young animals, making it particularly rare and expensive. The sheer quantity and quality of vellum alone for a substantial book represented a staggering initial investment. Once the vellum was prepared, the scribe began their work. This was the meticulous and painstaking copying of the text, letter by letter, from an existing manuscript. Scribes, often monks in monastic scriptoria or professional lay scribes in urban centers, spent their days hunched over, working with extraordinary precision. They used quills, usually from goose or swan feathers, and carefully prepared inks. Black ink was typically made from gallnuts and iron salts, while red ink, often used for headings or important passages, hence rubrication, was made from cinnabar or minium. Quality of the scribe's handwriting, its consistency, and its aesthetic appeal directly contributed to the value of the finished product. Copying a large text could take months, even years, of uninterrupted labor. Imagine the immense cost of paying a highly skilled professional for such an extended period. But what truly elevated these manuscripts into the realm of extreme expense was the illumination. This was the artistry of decoration and illustration. Master illuminators applied vibrant pigments and shimmering gold to transform the pages. The pigments themselves were sourced from across the known world and were incredibly costly. Ultramarine blue, perhaps the most prized pigment, was made from lapis lazuli, a semi-precious stone mined exclusively in Afghanistan. It had to be painstakingly ground and purified, a process so difficult and costly that ultramarine was often reserved for the most important figures or passages, like the Virgin Mary's robes. Vermilion, a brilliant red, came from cinnabar, a mercury ore. Greens often came from malachite or verdigris. Each pigment required specific preparation methods and binders. Gold was used lavishly. Thin sheets of gold leaf beaten to an astonishing thinness were applied to initial letters, borders, and full-page miniatures. Process involved laying down a gesso or bowl base, applying the gold leaf, and then burnishing it to a high sheen, creating a surface that literally glittered in the candlelight. This was not just about aesthetics. The gold often symbolized divine light and eternal truth. The sheer quantity of precious metals, especially gold, used in a lavishly illuminated manuscript could amount to a small fortune. Consider a single large illuminated Bible, like the Bury St. Edmund's Bible from the 12th century. Its creation would have involved multiple scribes and illuminators working for many years. It contains hundreds of pages, each requiring careful preparation of vellum. Its vibrant illuminations include full-page miniatures and historiated initials, bursting with narrative detail in gold leaf. While no direct ledger entry states its total cost, comparing it to other known commissions and the market value of materials and labor, its production would have been equivalent to purchasing a substantial amount of prime agricultural land. It was a possession worthy of a king or a powerful abbot, a clear sign of immense spiritual and temporal power. A Book of Hours, a popular personal prayer book for the wealthy, was another prime example of an exceptionally expensive illuminated manuscript. The Tres Riches Heures du Duc de Berry, created for Jean, Duke of Berry, in the early 15th century, stands as perhaps the most famous and elaborate of these. This manuscript is an absolute triumph of late medieval art, featuring breathtaking, full-page miniatures depicting seasonal activities, castles, and religious scenes, all rendered with astonishing detail and brilliant colors, copious amounts of gold leaf, and intricate borders. The Limburg brothers, the primary artists, along with scribes and other artisans, worked on it for years. The Duke was one of the wealthiest and most extravagant patrons of the arts in Europe. Cost of this single book would have been colossal, likely equivalent to the construction of a large private chapel or a significant portion of a country estate. It was a private devotional tool, but also a public declaration of its owner's refined taste, piety, and unimaginable wealth. Even academic or scholastic texts, while perhaps less lavishly illustrated than a Book of Hours or a Bible, were still incredibly costly. A copy of Aristotle's works, or a major medical text like Avicenna's Canon of Medicine, would require the same meticulous hand copying on vellum. While they might lack gold leaf, their sheer size and intellectual content, combined with the labor of highly educated scribes, made them immensely valuable. A student attending a university like Bologna or Paris, if they wished to own their own copies of essential texts, would face expenses that could bankrupt a lesser family. Often, students would rent texts or share them, or pay scribes to copy only specific crucial sections, highlighting the prohibitive cost of full volumes. The binding of these manuscripts also contributed to their cost. They were typically bound in sturdy wooden boards covered with fine leather, sometimes tooled or embossed. For the most precious volumes, bindings could be made from silver or gold studded with jewels and ivory carvings, turning the book itself into a reliquary of knowledge and devotion. These elaborate bindings were commissions for master jewelers and metalworkers, adding thousands of more man-hours and precious materials to the already immense cost. In summary, the astronomical expense of illuminated manuscripts stemmed from the vast quantity of high-quality vellum required, the months or years of highly skilled scribal labor, the extraordinary cost of rare and precious pigments, the abundant use of gold and silver, and the artistic genius of the illuminators. Each illuminated manuscript was a unique masterpiece, a synthesis of art, craft, and knowledge. They served as primary educational tools, conveying religious doctrine, scientific knowledge, classical literature, and philosophical ideas. But more than that, they were tangible representations of immense wealth and prestige, treasured possessions that signified the ultimate commitment to learning and the profound value placed on the written word in the medieval world. To acquire one was a lifetime's ambition. To possess a library of them was the hallmark of a king.